Security is on the minds of everyone in Nigeria's oil and gas industry. Engineer Simbi Wabote, who's Executive Secretary of the Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board, along with management of the board, received the delegation of the Nigerian Navy ship Soro, led by its commander, Commodore Sunday Daniel Atakpa, on a courtesy visit to the NCDMB. And joining us now live from Yenagoa is the Executive Secretary of the NCDMB, Engineer Simbi Wabote. Good morning to you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. How is vandalism in the Niger Delta region impacting local content development?
Thanks, Rotus. Thanks for having me on the program. No doubt, vandalism impacts local content greatly because it brings about challenge to investment and increased cost of doing business. Once you begin to have this kind of activities, if you then compare the cost of doing business to other oil-producing countries, perhaps the numbers go very high. This becomes a lot difficult. The amount of money you spend on security becomes unimaginable. And most of the times the thinking is that once you install those facilities, they're all going to go up in flames. So it's really concerning. It affects local content because if there are no activities, of course, in the oil and gas sector, there will be no local content. So it's a big challenge. And I think that needs to be contained as quickly as possible. But in any case, to be fair, these activities have actually gone down tremendously when you compare to previous years when we used to face vandalism and also militancy back in the Niger Delta. But again, you continue to see pockets of this coming up here and there. This latest incident is a bit of a surprise to the government, the state government, and also to the people of Bayelsa State. We as local content will also exist because our headquarters is here in Bayelsa State. It's also a thing of concern for us on how to progress local content if we begin to receive a lot of this vandalism.
So was any of this discussed during that courtesy visit of the delegation from the Nigerian Navy?
Of course, part of the reason for visit, it is Navy, it is security related. Part of it is collaboration between NCDMB and the Navy. We also talked about maritime security in the area beyond Bayelsa State. We also talked about security of our staff, NCDMB in the state, because you have the NNS Soro domiciled here in Bayelsa State, and we've been collaborating. They've been providing us with maritime security anytime we go about inspecting some of our projects. So that was extensively discussed during the meeting.
Thank you, sir. So I guess as part of that, I want to get your take on the Petroleum Industry Act, and I guess it's sections that look at empowering local communities to take ownership of assets as a way to curb these acts of vandalism. What do you make of the act, and I guess empowering local communities?
No, I think the act itself reinforces the existence of NCDMB, reinforces the existence of local content in the act, particularly even the issue about the Community Trust Fund, which we believe when it becomes operational, to a large extent is going to address some of this restiveness within the oil producing community. So it in itself is also an enabler. If properly implemented, if you have the right people driving the management of that host community trust fund, it also creates an enabling environment in terms of stability in the regulatory framework and governance of the oil and gas industry to a large extent. Some opaque areas that we've been struggling with for the past couple of years has been addressed by the PIA itself. But again, what they say is that the taste of the pudding is in the eating, and the implementation of the PIA to the latter, to a large extent, help. But if we take a wrong turn in terms of implementation, then it will go back to business as usual. But the intentment of the PIA and those who put it together is to reinforce community participation, is to reinforce local content, as it were. I mean, one example I can give you of the PIA. Prior to this time, most field development plans, when they are done, local content is not taken into consideration. But if you read the PIA, I think it's section 109, 2 of the PIA, it says before the FDP goes to the Commission for approval, it must get the approval of the local content board. That is further reinforcing local content in the activities of the oil and gas sector. So I think it's a good bill, but I pray and hope that we have it implemented rightly, and then we will begin to see the results, in my view.
Excellent. Thank you for that, sir. Okay, so the Governing Council of the Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board has approved the establishment of a $50 million development fund. How far would that go in achieving the local content development vision?
Yeah, thanks. One of the greatest challenge we have seen in the oil and gas industry is manufacturing. Most of the components we use in the sector are all imported and brought into the country. There's dearth of manufacturing all over the country, be it in the oil and gas sector, be it in other sectors of the economy. But what the $50 million would help us is to support the incubation of manufacturing in our industrial parks. Because the challenge manufacturers have in this country is ability to get funding to establish manufacturing factories and concerns, because most of the banks you have in the country are not interested in funding manufacturing. They are rather interested in commodity trading. If you ask somebody who wants to import PMS or diesel, you go to the bank, they will open a letter of credit quickly for that person. But if you say, look, I want to set up a manufacturing shop, in 5 years' time or 3 years' time, I'll start producing and hope to break even, banks will not even listen to you. So we are building industrial parks in most of the oil-producing states. We believe that by the end of this year, 2 of those industrial parks will become operational, because we go through a process of end-to-end thinking. It's not just building the infrastructure. How do you encourage manufacturers to situate themselves within the industrial park? Based on this, we approached the Governing Council of the Board to say, look, we need to give seed funding, seed capital to manufacturers who want to establish themselves within our industrial park. And the Governing Council graciously gave us that approval. It's not a colossal sum of money, but I believe it is a good start. With all the manufacturing concerns that have been discussing with us, we are going to help to fund them and establish them and start producing a lot of the components that we need in the oil and gas industry, as well as these linkage sectors. Because don't forget, for every 1 job you create in the oil and gas sector, you create about 10 jobs in other linkage sectors. So the manufacturing will expand to linkage industries that supports the oil and gas business.
Thank you for that, sir. So what's your stance on the push to get Africa to transition to renewable energy, possibly at the expense of fossil fuel investment?
Let me say this clearly. Nigeria or myself, I'm not against renewable energy. It is the right thing to do. But my position is that it has to be done with the face of human kindness. It has to be done. We have to have a long-term approach to transiting from our God-given natural resources into renewable energy. We made the mistake the first time. Probably I was not born then, when coal was the mainstay in terms of providing energy for us. And then hydrocarbon was discovered, and all of a sudden we abandoned the entire coal resources that we have in the country and transited into hydrocarbon. And today we are now trying to discover our natural resources, 38 billion barrels of oil, proven reserve, about 206 trillion cubic feet of gas proven, unproven about 600 trillion cubic feet. And then all of a sudden somebody comes and says, look, this is dirty, you need to move away from it. Don't forget, if you move to renewables, the components associated with renewables are not natural to you. They are alien, so they have to be imported and brought here to give you the so-called energy that you need. Can you believe it that for 56 years, we have operated oil and gas, the oil and gas industry have operated in Nigeria. We cannot even deal with our energy issues in the country. You know the story of power. We can't address it. Now you tell me, how are you going to address energy issues with renewables that most of the components are alien to you and expensive? So the point being made here is that that process needs to be gradual, and we need to be deliberate about it and not forced to transit to an alien renewable technology that we don't even have the natural resources. Yes, you could argue that there is sun there, but the number of megawatts that you require to generate power with the sun is quite substantial in terms of the solar panels that you have to build across the country. But you have a natural resource, you have gas, which is also, by the way, green energy. It's clean, cleaner than crude oil, cleaner than diesel, that will be utilized. And I think the proponents of renewables are rethinking to bring gas back to the table as part of green energy. The argument was that it's fossil fuel, it has to be put on the back seat. But I think there is a thought process that is currently pervading the proponents of renewable to think about gas and to think about solar energy as well as nuclear energy as part of green energy to provide power. I mean, an example is what is happening with the two neighbors currently that are fighting themselves. You can see the impact on the global energy consumption. And you can imagine that you cannot sit back and say you are not going to have conflict. There might be conflict in some other regions that are producing this hydrocarbon, and the world will now sink into the current situation that we find ourselves. So my position is clear. Yes, we like renewables, but we have to do it at our own pace, and we have to be encouraged to do it at our own pace. That's my position.
Engineer Simbi Wabote, the Executive Secretary of the Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board, thank you so much for your time, sir, joining us live from Yenagoa. Talk about developing local content in Nigeria's oil and gas industry. Appreciate your time, sir.